The first week of April is National Young Adult Awareness Week, and tonight we have a panel of young survivors and a caregiver to share about their experiences. Sam Hewlett, the James Young Adult Social Worker, will be here to facilitate the discussion. Sam sees patients clinically for support and navigation here at the James. So please join me in welcoming Sam and our panel. I'll turn it over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Julie. Welcome. I'm really excited about tonight. I think especially given COVID, we've sort of been lacking these times to just kind of get together and share stories and learn from each other's experiences. And so I'm very, excited that Abby and Erin and Rachel and Chris agreed to do this with me because I know that there's so much value here. Both for the community that's on tonight and the community that'll watch in the future. So thank you guys. If you don't mind just going around and introducing yourselves and sharing a bit about your diagnosis and treatment regimen, that would be great to start.
I guess I'll start. I am Abby, and I was diagnosed February of last year. Started treatments with breast cancer. I started treatments in March, and I did chemo for 7 months, and then I had surgery in July, and then in the midst of it all, I got married in August. In between, and then radiation started. And then I did oral chemo for a few months. So I finished all treatments December.
I can go next. My name's Aaron Schmidt. I was diagnosed in late July of 2020 with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Went through 6 rounds of chemo. Was in remission after at round 4 was when I found out that I was in remission. A lot of things happened during that time. We had a child, started a new job, COVID, all that stuff. So it's a pretty crazy time to be going through this kind of thing. But we're happy and healthy now. This is my wife, Rachel.
I'm Rachel. Obviously, he just said I'm his wife, and I came along for the ride and either came in to appointments or spent a lot of time sitting in my car because of COVID outside of the James.
And I guess I'm up. I'm Chris Schultz. I was diagnosed with a very rare type of cancer called Ewing sarcoma in September of 2019. I went through 6 cycles of chemotherapy before having surgery on my right arm, which is where the Ewing sarcoma, which is a bone cancer, was taking place. They were able to remove it entirely, along with my shoulder and most of my upper right arm. I still have it though, so all good stories there. And then after my surgery, I went through another 8 rounds of chemotherapy until June of 2020, where I then finished it up. So I finished it up just at the tail end of COVID, or as COVID was beginning.
Great, thank you guys. So I just want to start by asking, obviously we know cancer as a young adult is extremely disruptive. What do you wish you would have known as a young adult, right? At diagnosis, sort of that time that feels like everything's a blur.
I think for me, I'm just like at the phase where I can finally look back and kind of realize what the heck happened last year. Because you're kind of just head down during it. When I got diagnosed, then they told me about a year. I was like, there's no way. And during chemo, like I was gonna give up. I couldn't do it. I was hospitalized. It was rough. So I think looking back now, one thing everyone tells you is that you don't know what to expect. Like you say, well, what are my symptoms going to be? And everyone tells you, well, everyone's different. And I think that's the thing that kind of pissed me off the most, but I get it. Like, I totally get it. And I would tell someone the same thing now, but I think that's hard to understand going through it, that you really don't know what someone else is how they're gonna react or whatnot. So I think really just for me was advocating for myself. And so making sure I advocated and just knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't seem like it a lot of times, but we're here, we're alive. And I think that's kind of the most important thing at the end of the day.
I think something that I wish I would have learned earlier would be to prioritize. So you have a lot of stuff that's going to happen, and like I said, I had a lot of stuff going on in my own life. Started school, college too at that time, so a lot of things were pulling me in different directions, and allowing yourself a little bit of forgiveness to dedicate towards the battle of your health, maybe over some other things that you have going on in your life, put me through a lot of stress until I figured that out.
Yeah, I mean, the first day into the James where they diagnose you and tell you this is the plan and this is what we're going to do to fix you essentially is probably the longest day that I have ever experienced in my life. It is a shell shock of a data dump of information on you, and just everything's coming at you at the same time. But I mean, that definitely passes. You'll get comfortable with it. You'll get kind of a routine out of it, is what I kind of learned, is that it's not, the thing I most wish I would have known actually is I wish I would have known more people that were on the same regimen and everything I was on, because I had the fortunate accident, I'll say, of meeting someone that also was on similar treatments. And it was great getting to talk to that guy about, here's what side effects I have. What do you do for that? Oh, I do this and that. And I mean, you learn to counteract a lot of the things that you'll experience as you go. It'd be nice to start off with that knowledge for sure, but it does get better from that first day.
Rachel, do you have any thoughts on just what that day is like as a caregiver, or that time is like?
Yeah, I think that my mistake in all of that, or something that I would tell somebody, I guess right now, to avoid at all costs would be, I just immediately started Googling everything. And all that I found out from that is, you come across like case studies, and the numbers in those case studies aren't meaningful to me. I'm not a trained oncologist. I have no idea what those numbers meant, but I allowed them to consume me. I almost obsessed over it, right? I would Google, and Google just gives kind of unrealistic scenarios most of the time. Very much not the reality. And I was constantly just trying to find what was going to happen next. And it was never right. The doctors would always come in and be like, with way more hope and way more confidence than anything I found on Google. And I just wished that I wouldn't have spent so much emotional energy on that, on Google, and on worrying about that. I also felt like I immediately just needed to be like strong for Aaron. Like, I have to be this strong person for Aaron, which is not my role with Aaron. That's not our roles with each other. Our roles are, if something is upsetting me or scaring me, I tell Aaron about it and we talk about it. But I was like, I can't talk to him about this because I don't want to upset him. And then I found out he was feeling the same way, that he didn't want to upset me, so he wasn't telling me his fears. And once we cleared the air on that, it was so much better for our relationship, and we could be more honest and communicate, and be a team, I guess, versus trying to pretend like I was fine and him pretend like he was fine. Just have that open communication back.
To build on like the Google comment, like there's so many side effects or so many new things that you're going to be experiencing while in the hospital. Oh, your whatever number was high. What's that mean? You know,
Yeah.
so there's so many things that are new, you know, outside of if you're working in a hospital that you don't hear every day. So kind of take it one step at a time and don't jump to conclusions.
It was not meaningful at all to go to Google like that.
I don't want to interrupt you guys, but yeah, I actually, before this meeting, that was one of the things I was thinking I would mention on this is don't Google it. When I first went to my boss to tell her that this is what's going on with me, the very first thing other than the sympathy she expressed, the very first thing she said to me is like, do not Google anything. There's nothing you'll get out of that that's going to help you. Like, and I mean, there's definitely a level of responsibility of listening to your doctors. And like you said, they're so knowledgeable and so great there. But yeah, like it took me I still honestly have never really Googled what I had. I might have let it slip to see what my odds were or something after I've gotten through this, but I did not want to know it at all when I was going through it or even in the beginning. So it will not help you. You'll never learn anything useful from it while you're going through.
I think for breast cancer, there's so many like subtypes of it that it's just so hard. Unless you really know what you're doing, you're going to find information that's not even relevant to the specific type you are. Or like for me, mine was a triple negative, which is the more aggressive, less studied, I'm basically in the 5%, whereas most people have either, HER2 or ER or PR positive. And so you're going to find a lot of information about those people. And, you may think, like, I know I thought, well, okay, like I was super early stage, I don't have to have chemo. And then I learned it was triple negative, which is one of the most aggressive forms. And so like that was a shock to me. So like for me, it was kind of like, well, there's just so much information that you could be thinking you're Googling your correct diagnosis, and you're going to be on a whole different path with all these meds that have nothing to do with your regimen.
Can any of you share an experience with fertility, either a discussion or preservation that you feel like would be helpful?
So I did fertility. So my husband and I weren't married at the time, but we knew we were getting married. And I've always wanted children. And so for me, that was my first thing. I said, you're not doing anything to me until I go to the fertility clinic. I have to wait it out. And everyone was amazing. It was all done within like 12 days, and it was crazy. But I did retrieval and freezing, and that just adds to it. It's emotional. It results you may not be expecting, or, I was naive about the process, and, hearing my odds of having a kid with what we got were not good. And I just lost it, because to me it was, oh, we're never going to have kids. And then, it's how do I explain this to my soon-to-be husband? We have to have this talk about, what if we can't have kids? Is that a deal breaker for him? Because, I can't do anything about that. So that was really emotional, and going through shots and 3-4 times a day, and going through the process and knowing, we have to go through IVF potentially, afterwards. And there's a lot of debate within my community, within like breast cancer specifically, about how soon you can try. And there's like 2 years to 5 to 10, depending on the type you have. And that didn't work for me. And so it was like kind of figuring out with my doctors, like, okay, realistically, like we're ready for kids. So what can we do? And my doctor was fantastic. She listened to me and she said, okay, that's a goal. Like we'll agree, we'll meet in the middle. And we did. And so like for me, that helped knowing this was all worth it and we're doing this for the right reasons. And now we're on the other side in survivorship, going through fertility currently and trying to figure out what that looks like. And, there is some hope that, we don't have to just do IVF. We do get to try other ways and work our way up to that. And so I think that renewed the hope for me that I can have kids, that it's not going to take away all of that. But it was hard. It was hard to have that discussion with, my now husband about the possibilities that, he may not be okay with not having kids, or what do I do? Is this relationship over? And so I'm sure that was hard for him to be having this conversation too, and, adoption and all of that. So just the added stress of all of that, and then trying to go through marriage. But I would say if that's something you really want, advocate, like, make sure you go through that process, because you don't know if you can get pregnant on the flip side. And so to, friends that I have that are hormone positive, they have to wait years, 5, 10, because of the medications they're on. And they may never get that opportunity.
Thanks, Abby.
For our scenario, as I said, I was in the hospital. We had to push up our induction date of our last child, so that way, I could be there for that, and then myself go into the hospital. So we had just had our third child, and for us, that's probably it. But thinking about, I didn't spend as much time talking with the doctors regarding that. I know that they had said that chances are reduced. It's just not something that we were focused on at that time. So it wasn't as burdensome. And being that I think we're done, it was less hard to hear that news, but still, not something they ever want to hear. My mom actually had Hodgkin's lymphoma too, and that was after me, and she had 2 more children after that. So I guess I've always had that in my head, her success, and it's not as scary.
As for me, I did not have kids or family, and I still don't at this point. However, with my regimen, it was told to me that it was going to be very likely that I wouldn't be able to after the fact. So in kind of a blitz, because once they kind of get you going on these treatments, it's like, can you start next week kind of thing. It's not a we'll get to you in a few months kind of. So it's right away. So I met with a counselor on that, and they got everything pushed through, and it was a pretty quick process to begin saving some sperm, so that in the future, when I do meet the right person and everything of that nature, then I'd be able to seek that option. So, I mean, regardless how you're feeling at that time, wherever you are in your life, I mean, it's not a bad option to at least consider that, to prepare, because you don't know where you'll be in a few years after this is all over and what's going to happen to you. I mean, you probably didn't expect to be going through what you were about to go through anyway. So life comes at you fast, and just prepare for it in any way you can.
I think one thing too, I wish I would have known was the mental toll it would take. I was not prepared for that, just the quickness. I got to see every doctor the next day, and they're like, all right, you're starting. Like, I don't know if I was thinking like, oh, I have to go through a cycle, or who knows, but nope, we started on medications the next day. And I can't say enough about my fertility clinic, because they got all of the meds for me. And then I gave meds back at the end, but they're like, we know how important this is, but emotionally it's a lot of money. And so you're kind of thinking, is this worth it? Do I do this? And it is. it's worth it just to know you have that option. So even though you're kind of lost in the whole cancer, I think, like Chris said, do it. You don't know where life will take you or what will happen. And hopefully, you'll be able to, but just in case you can't, at least to know that that could be an option was, I think for me, kind of helped me along and get through the process, knowing like, hey, we want to get married, we want to have kids. Like I have to fight for my life if I want to raise kids. And so that helped me through it.
Thanks, guys. Can you talk about some of the challenges you experienced just being a young adult with cancer, whether within sort of your specific treatment regimen or just sort of balancing treatment with everything else going on? And then maybe some things that were helpful or are helpful based on those. Rachel, you're also welcome to share from a caregiver perspective at any time.
I think for me as a young adult going through it, everyone kept saying you're too young for cancer. And cancer doesn't really care how old you are, especially for breast cancer. I mean, stereotypically, everyone kind of thinks over 60 or postmenopausal. So to keep hearing it's benign, we're pretty sure it's benign. Oh crap, you have cancer. We didn't expect this. So like none of that helped going through it so young. And just knowing we have different needs than someone in their 60s or 70s or whatever the typical age is. And so I think for everyone to be like, oh, well, my neighbor had breast cancer. Okay, how does that pertain to me? Like that is not helpful to hear that as a young adult, because 99% of these people are in their 60s. And so like, okay, did you have a husband? Did they have a wife? Like, did you have to worry about kids or, intimacy? No. Okay. Then like that is not pertinent to my situation. So I think as a young adult, like we just have these different challenges, and especially like in a marriage, the intimacy part is just a whole different ball game. And so I think that's just a lost cause for some people. And so it is hard to find other people like you that you can ask questions or that understand the struggles. So I think as young adults, like we need that support, even if it's not the same kind of cancer, just knowing that we're all going through something so young. And I was at like a prime in my life. I was in school. I was working a ridiculous amount. Like my life was not set for cancer. Like I didn't have time for cancer. So that was for me the hardest part. Aaron said, be graceful to yourself. That was a hard lesson for me to learn. I'm still trying to learn that lesson. I don't do well doing nothing. So to have my life come to a halt while I'm in school, working a lot, it was a learning curve. So be nice to yourself.
I can jump in. So I guess the negatives is you're so busy. you have so many things, like young kids, baseball practice, all this stuff that's going on in your life that requires, it's not going to stop. It's not going to pause. As you're going through this, I relied upon, my wife, my family a lot to just take over life, just keep the ship going, But I guess I do think of it as a blessing, having gone through it at the age that I did. I mean, 30. My body's much stronger. We have a lot more people around us. Grandmas and grandpas are all still here. We have a great support system. So doing this at a young age, I'm thankful. If you have to do it, I would rather do it when I did it than later in life. So I guess looking at it through those eyes, it was a blessing.
Yeah, I think like Aaron said, our relationship, we're partners. Like we are 50-50 on the kids, on the housework, on everything, right? And I was 40 weeks and 2 days pregnant when we were in the ER, being told that Aaron had some sort of mass growing. so, we got induced, and so then I had a newborn and our 2 boys. And I just expected Aaron to be doing half of everything. And I remember looking at Lenny, our newborn daughter, and just thinking like, and this sounds horrible, but I think everybody here knows what I mean by this. But I remember looking at her and just being like, I don't want you. I don't want to do this without Aaron. Like Aaron's supposed to be here with me doing this, and I'm by myself while he's at the James. Like I don't want to do this. And I can remember telling the boys, like I have to tell the boys that Daddy has cancer. And I remember Jude, he's 6, he's almost 7 now, but he was, 5 or whatever. I told him, I said, Daddy's really sick and he's in the hospital and he has cancer. And I remember Jude saying, that's not good. You can die from that. And I said, yeah, but I think, I think Daddy will be okay. They seem really like they can help him there. And, but I'm like, what am I doing right now? Telling my 5-year-old, like, it's just so surreal that I'm having this conversation with my 5-year-old and that I'm trying to get my 5-year-old to grasp some really mature concepts, right? That Daddy's very, very sick and it's serious, but he's going to be okay. And for a while there, every time he had to go to the hospital for a checkup, they were like, why is Dad going to the hospital? I'm like, he's okay. He's just, he's just getting a checkup or whatever. So for me, obviously having the newborn was kind of a special, unique situation, but kids at all. And it doesn't have to be telling anybody's child at whatever age that their dad is sick is just, it just wasn't something that I ever thought I would have to do. And it was scary, but.
Like you guys said before, there's no time to make a plan. You're going to the hospital next week or tomorrow or whatever, as soon as you can get in there. So there's no time to think about all those scenarios and make a plan for what are we going to do to get our kids to preschool or whatever else while you're in the hospital. And the uncertainty, you go into the hospital and you think that you're getting out on this date, and it never works like that. You're always 1 more day, 2 more days. And having to deal with all that stuff, and then a young family was hard.
I guess to follow that, which is very hard to do, is I was much more fortunate, I guess, in my family and life situation. I grew up around Columbus, Ohio. I now live in Cincinnati, and I did live in Cincinnati when I was diagnosed, but I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, so I had a family support system in Columbus set up for me close to the James. And yeah, as a young adult, like everyone else has stated, you're busy. You've got so much going on. You're not one of the older people that have the chance to retire maybe, or are already pretty well set in their lives and everything's set up. You're still building the life around you. The way that I was pretty lucky was that I work in a job that let me work remotely pretty effectively. And now with COVID, it's actually, a lot of companies are shaping a lot more towards that, which is great news, I think, for people that are having to undergo treatments, because prior to it, a lot of jobs weren't set up that way. But being able to work remotely meant that I was able to continue working through my treatments. And my treatments lasted, I would be in the hospital for about 5 days at a time. And one of the benefits, like Aaron mentioned, is that since you are younger, you can withstand so much more. And it's actually an advantage, especially when coming through these treatments, is that my regimen, when I was given the kind of put in front of me, was I could either do what is basically a children's or a children's regimen, which would be 1 week of treatment, 1 week of recovery, and then back to treatment the following week. Or what my oncologist was telling me is that otherwise it'd be 1 week of treatment and 2 weeks of recovery. But because I was still so young, I was able to, my body had a pretty good chance of recovering in that time frame. And the way that I like to kind of picture my cancer treatment was, I took it as a challenge, not really as an obstacle. It was something that I was going to beat. So I would be coming in there on Monday mornings, talking to my oncologist, and he'd be like, I don't know about these counts, they're a little low. And I'd be like, yeah, I can do it. Like, let's go for it. Like, I'd be egging him on because I was going to do everything under my power to get myself going, to get myself back in there, and to give myself as good of a shot as possible. So I really took it as a challenge, as a way to, yeah, I can beat this, and I'm going to do everything that I can to beat it. And I took that youth as a advantage towards it, not as a detriment. But like I said, I was lucky I was able to work from the hospital while I was receiving my chemotherapy. The one piece of advice that I really can't stress enough is to stay active while you're at it. Don't shut yourself down. Don't shut yourself in. Honestly, the biggest thing that I enjoyed as I was a patient there was that all the nurses are so friendly, and frankly, they're all roughly our age. So, I mean, they honestly kind of become your friends as you're doing it. And one of the challenges that was put to me was to try to get 10,000 steps. So I was circling the halls 5-6 times a day. And you get to know people really fast that way. It's a really good opportunity. So I really take it as an opportunity in any way that you can. Any moment that you have for it, just see what you can do to make a positive outcome from it.
I'd agree with the staying active thing. I before worked out 3-4 times a week, and I worked out about twice a week during chemo. Some days, I'm not sure how I got in and out of the gym. I didn't always make an hour. I might have moved like 3 muscles, but like I was there. I attended, and I honestly think that is probably one of the only reasons I made it through as well as I did. And I do remember them saying, you know, well, you're young, you have a whole life ahead of you, we're hitting you hard. Like, I'm pretty sure their goal was to kill me, which, I mean, it's fine. Like, I am thankful. I was so young, and a few times I almost did. I'm like, y'all are about to be successful. But like now I look back and I'm thankful that like they double dosed me with everything, so that I am here to live my life. You know, in the moment it sucks and it's hard, and you're kind of like, why are they doing this? I mean, like, why is it so hard? But it's worth it just to be here today, to put it past and move on.
I'll build on that or chime in, even though it wasn't part of the question, but my plan was the same thing, to get through it. I mean, I set goals for myself on how fast I could clear my methotrexate, you know, and took pride in those numbers. I always wish that they would like frame how many days it took to clear it and hang it up for over my bed or something like that. Because I mean, yeah, like you said, I walked. They said that might help. So you get out and you walk and just try to hit it as hard as possible. And same thing in between treatments. I mean, there wasn't much time to slow down, so you just kind of had to do it. But even if there was, I didn't want to. I mean, I went back to work as soon as I got back home, and I mean, kept going. I think that helps a lot.
Mentally, if nothing else, just to I decided to stop working just because of the way my disability worked. But for me, I needed something to keep me going, to keep me occupied, to give me a reason to get through it. And so mentally that I needed the gym. I needed normalcy because I like control and I lost all control and all normalcy. So just to have the gym as a mental thing was huge for me. I mean, not even physically, just mentally knowing my body can still do this. And even now in survivorship, like, I may, have put on some weight during, the treatments or whatever. And now it's like, okay, I can still go to the gym. My strength is getting back. Like my heart can do this. So just that sheer fact that I can still go to the gym is I remind myself every week, okay, your body went through a lot. Like for you to just get your butt to the gym is huge. Like a lot of people can't do that. And so I try to remain thankful that, even through all of this and everything we went through, like we are still here today and moving and all of that.
I think it definitely makes you, I'm sorry.
Keep going.
Oh, I was gonna say, I definitely think it makes you feel better. Like it was such a great break for me to just go stroll the halls or just move around. I mean, it's not just physical, which the physical is really helpful. They'd walk into my room, I think, when I would come in for treatments, and they'd be like, are you gonna need these shots? And they're shots that like are anti-clotting shots for the patients that stay in their room in their bed all week or so. I'm like, no, that won't be necessary, because I knew what I was going to be doing. Like I knew I was going to be moving around. And so that's a really big advantage. It just it's a really good mental reliever as well. And like I said, it's not just about the physical nature of moving around, which definitely helps you. There's no doubt that it helps you. In fact, when I was training my right arm back up after I was out of my sling, I was actually using my little IV cart as my like weight to like help train up that arm too. But on top of that, it's just seeing people. Like that's the last thing you want to do, is you don't want to shut yourself down from seeing people and communicating with people. Like it's so important to make sure that you're still just being friendly and just going about and talking to people. You don't want to shut yourself off like that.
Luckily, the James is pretty big, so you got a pretty wide area to troll around. And
there's a nice little path, yeah.
We know social isolation, is a significant challenge for young adults. One is sort of, the first part is, did you connect with other young adults through treatment? And two, do you feel like COVID impacted that at all? Because we already knew social isolation was sort of a challenge prior to COVID, and then we sort of added this barrier in a pandemic. So I just would be curious to hear your experiences with how to connect and what was helpful.
I really feel like I can start on this one, which I was being shy before, but I remembered begging the nurse to be like, please tell him he can't go kayaking with his port. And the nurse being like, well, if you keep it dry and covered. But Aaron, I mean, definitely our birthdays are both in August, and we have this birthday party in August with all of our friends. And I remembered all of them just like waiting, like, are we still doing the kayak trip, or what's up with Aaron? And Aaron was like, yeah, why wouldn't we go? And I'm like, if that's how you feel, great. And we went. But it was so important to him, like you said. I mean, we were outside on kayaks and with a group that we were around all the time, he was just like, yeah, we're going. And I'm like, I remember like crying to my friend, like, he's okay, right? And she's like, he seems really good.
That trip was the first time that I felt my hair falling out. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget realizing that weekend that my hair is falling out. And so I'm so glad that we did it, but it also holds that other memory for me, which I don't want to say is a bad one. It's different. It's not ideal, obviously, but it's not a bad one. That's what I think about on that trip, though. But I guess on the social, aspect of the question, you can use social media, negatively or positively, and I tried to use it positively in the sense of seeking out other people that maybe were related or diagnosed, no matter if it was my type or different cancer societies. I like seeing motivational, stuff on their pages, and I thought that was helpful. My wife kept a pretty good log about, what was going on with me every, I don't know, a couple months or month or whatever. She would update friends and family on Facebook, and I really enjoyed seeing that. I really enjoyed not having to do it myself and not having to tell people the same story over and over. So I thought that was really nice. Actually, Mark Hoppus, who is a member of Blink-182, he was diagnosed with the same type of cancer that I was. Almost a year later, like right when I was going into remission, he was diagnosed, and I started following him. And I had said before that just wish that he has so many people that are following him, but if he wanted to talk to somebody, I'm here to talk to you. So I follow him now just because of that. I mean, I like Blink-182, but him specifically because of that. But I thought socialization through social media was helpful.
I think for me, when I was diagnosed, I was right during all of the height of COVID last year. And I remember they weren't going to let anyone go with me to chemo. And all of mine was done at Spielman, which there's like nobody my age. And so like that was hard because, they wanted me to do it alone and with no one my age. And I remember I was not having it. I finally put my foot down and said, I'm not going to chemo. Like, I will not show up if I can't have one person with me. Like I am I'm 33 now, but I was 32. And I'm like, I am alone in this. Like I have nobody. Like you're not going to put me through chemo by myself. And so it took my doctor a couple tries, and she had to take it all the way to the head of the hospitals, and she got special approval. And that was everything to me. I took my sister with me. She went to every single one. She drove from Cincinnati, came to mine was every other week. And she was just my person for chemo. She makes you laugh at anything. Like she kept my mind off of it. And I remember my first chemo, I had a reaction. I couldn't breathe. And I was petrified. But I was glad she was the one with me. Like my husband would have freaked out if he'd been that one with me. And so I'm just thankful he didn't have to go through that. But then they're like, oh, all right, we're restarting it. And I was like, what do you mean you're restarting? Like, I just about died. Like, we called a code here. Like, what are you going to do to me? And so just to have her there made everything. But I think it took me a lot longer to find peers. I had one girl through Pink Ribbon Girls that I connected with that was a couple months ahead of me. And that was really helpful because I tried cold capping for my hair. I had really, really, really long hair. And I thought cold capping was the cure. I was determined it was going to work. I knew it was. Well, it did not work. And my second treatment, my hair became matted and I freaked out. Freaked out's an understatement. I lost it. And that to me was harder than the cancer. And so just have to go through it all, and not to have a lot of people that understood it was harder for me with the type and my support system's a little bit different, as I don't really have like a lot of female support. I don't have my mom anymore. So going through a cancer like that without like a female to kind of understand, like my dad's great, but like I'm not talking to him about my breasts. So it was a little unique that it was just, my husband, same thing. Like it's just different as a woman, you understand that. So to have my best friend at least like that moral support was good. But COVID really just threw a wrench in it. And my husband couldn't come with me to most of my appointments, but at least my chemo, I could have one person. But it was tough going through it all during COVID.
Right. And then there's me. Oh, sorry. I was very lost in that story. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention hair, I guess, because both of our other panelists have mentioned it now. And I know this isn't even the question, but that is a strangely, it's like a strangely humbling experience, I guess, when you start losing your hair, because I did as well. And it's such a weird feeling, because it's definitely already real. You've already been through one round of treatments, you've already experienced some of the side effects, but once you start, like, it starts coming out and small little clumps are just coming out in general, and you start seeing it like on the pillow, you're like, this is real. Like it hits you a little bit differently. But it pretty soon, I mean, it's gone. You'll take it off, and from there it's the new normal. You just learn to live with it, just like anything that happens to you throughout it. I mean, like I mentioned, my shoulder and my arm are mostly replaced here, or up in the top half of it, which means I can't lift heavy things with that arm. The sad news is I can't help people move in or out of places anymore, which is my lifelong dream and hobby. But I mean, it does really, like, it puts a question. You're like, what if I need to move this heavy object or that heavy object? You're a young person, you're still trying to get that stuff done. So it does leave you a lot of like questions on how am I going to do things, but at the same time, you just kind of learn to live with it. Like it's just your new normal. You figure new ways out. You realize you didn't need that, I guess. But to get back to the question of social support or knowing anyone, I was one of the stubborn people from the beginning. I was offered, do you want someone to kind of counsel or anything of that nature? And of course I said, no, not really. I was always a big proponent advocate of, I wanted someone that was going to be fighting it with me instead of someone that had already fought it and could look back on it and kind of talk about it from a perspective of, oh yeah, that part wasn't so bad, or that part isn't. Because I'll be honest, I mean, talking about it now, we talk about the hard and the difficulties of it, but reliving those days, like some of those days are very, very hard for sure through treatments. And I wanted someone that could share more realistically in those experiences. Well, through some odds piece of fate, when I was in the James for probably my third round of treatment, I was sat down waiting to get checked in from a nice couple. And it just had happened a couple weeks prior during my first treatment. I was being told by some nurses, there's this couple that walks like 10,000 steps a day up here or something like that when they're in here. And me being kind of competitive was part of what spurred me to do all the walking around the halls, was that I wasn't going to let some couple beat me in that. I'm young, I'm spry, I was going to be able to do it. So I started doing that as well. But little did I know I was meeting these people at that time. They asked me what room I was going to be in, and I was 2 rooms down from them. We get to talking. He was an avid golfer like me. And yeah, so we met up while we were on the floor. We did some walking tours together, and we've been good friends since. He had another type of sarcoma, not in his limb, but we were on a very similar regimen. And that's where I really saw a lot of benefits, is that I was still learning a lot of things with my chemotherapy. I still had a lot of challenges I was overcoming, but we got to talk about, hey, do you get these side effects? Do you get these? What did you do for those? And I mean, it was really nice talking with someone that not only knew about what I was going through, but that also knew what to do about them, and really could like share experiences and what works, what doesn't, kind of troubleshoot those kinds of things. And I met a great friend through that. So I was lucky, but again, I would have never met, well, I met him in the waiting area, but I would have never met him if I wasn't active and mobile like that. And through my courses of walking through the halls, I've met lots of really wonderful people that also were doing some strolls. I remember a really nice old lady that did not like the food there, which there's a few meals that are a little questionable, but you can always find something.
Thank you, guys. I know we're going to save some time for questions, but I know we started saying, what advice or what do you wish you would have known sort of at diagnosis. I do want to just ask that question again and change a word, saying, what do you wish you would have known about sort of this acute survivorship period? What do you wish you would have known sort of on the last day of treatment about the period, knowing you guys are a little bit farther from that?
I think for me, I mean, granted, I'm only like a couple months in survivorship, but everyone kept saying survivorship is almost harder than treatment. And I was like, there's no way. You're going through key, like, no. They are right. I don't think I have struggled in so many just different aspects that I have in survivorship. It's really hard. Everyone kind of just assumes it's over. Like, cancer is not over. For me specifically, it's more of when it will return. I hope I'm part of the 20% that it doesn't, but my risk of reoccurrence is so high that will always be, it's every pain. Is the cancer back? Is this cancer? Is this a different cancer? Like, trying to figure out how to live your life without that as a worry. And, especially for, where my husband and I are at, being newly married, and it took a very hard toll on our relationship, going through it and being married, and him understanding what active treatment is like versus survivorship. And in survivorship, I've changed jobs. I'm still doing school, but, like, people don't think about what you're still going through in survivorship. And you just have a whole different new set of challenges. And mentally like, for me, I have a greater appreciation for life. Like, that is one thing I'm thankful for, that, like, I value life way different than I did. But not everyone in life is like that. Like, it takes something like that. So to figure out how to appreciate life, but, like, my husband may not understand that as much. And so how do we, like, balance life, me knowing how precious it is and being taken away at any point, in that. So survivorship is hard. It's really hard, but everything you feel is normal. It's expected, like, but I will say I'm trying to figure out who I am. I will never be who I was, and that's okay. But, try to figure out who I am now is extremely hard. And so I would just tell everybody, like, don't think when you're done with treatment that it's over. I honestly think it's just beginning. And it can be the hardest part, and that's okay. And that's fine. But that's hard to explain to other people. And that's okay. They may not understand that, but it's definitely a self journey. And it's tough.
Well, much like it starts, it also really rapidly, it also ends really rapidly. You go from, I'll be here next week, to see ya, good luck. And it's like, wait a second, I was supposed to be doing all this stuff. And so all of a sudden you're just like, and they're like, we'll see you in 3 months or whenever your next scans and checkup are. I mean, they don't leave you, but it's a very sudden kind of shock that all of a sudden you're not going back all the time, and you're done with that stage. And I think it affects everyone, where you are hypersensitive to everything that's going on, where you feel something somewhere in your body and you're like, oh no, like, and I mean, I think that slowly starts to fade over time, at least in my experience now that I've been a few years out from it. But it's still always there. It's always in the back of your mind. I don't think you ever stop being a cancer patient in any form. I think it's always something you retain from that period of time. But I will say that on the bright side, you do gain a huge new appreciation for life and daily events. As I mentioned, my friend that I met through it, is we would talk about it, we'd go golfing together, and he would say to me is that it's really hard to have a bad day, isn't it? Because you're so grateful for everything that you've been through and where you are now, that you might have some small inconvenience, and you think about it in the grand scheme of everything that you've gone through, and it's like, why am I even getting upset about this? It's nothing. Like, of all the things that you could be upset about, it's really easy to rationalize things in that way.
It's definitely, I thought of a lot of things, when you asked that question, but probably the most glaring in my head right now is being that I'm, a year and a half out, still going through some side effects. I still have a stent in, which hopefully anytime now that'll be done and we'll be finally done. But it's hard to get back to normal life for me. You're almost like the center of attention, and then okay, you're all better, and you look normal now, and you physically probably feel better, and then to just go back into life. I mean, I definitely did a lot of things. I took a job as a teacher, so I luckily I had the summer off last year, so I did a lot of things that I wanted to do, which on one of those vacations I ended up in the hospital from these side effects, so not as happy there. But I definitely did a lot of things that I wanted to do, and the kind of those bucket list things. But I don't know, I struggle a little bit mentally with, why am I going through life doing these things that I don't want to do? Or if there's any trivial things that, you get worked up about. It just seems, when you have your health into perspective like that, and then you're wasting time or energy on things that you don't want to do, or frustrations in your life, it's hard for me at least. So it's been a little bit challenging in that regard.
Yeah, Aaron. So I'm a little bit of an antsy person, and I always have been, right? So I definitely know what it's like to have anxiety over something. Aaron, however, people would always joke, like, does he ever get worked up about anything? I mean, he was just super chill. And I think this is what it took for him to experience anxiety and to experience mental health as well, right? And I remember he woke up in the middle of the night and he was holding his chest and he was like, it hurts. I think I need to go to the ER. And I'm like, does it hurt like when you had cancer? And he's like, no, it's different. And it's not funny, but it's kind of funny now. And I was like, yeah, dude, you're having an anxiety attack. You need to chill out. We need to talk about this. And I said, you need to ask for help. You need to ask for help, just like you wouldn't ignore cancer. So why are you going to ignore this? You got to get help for this. And I actually called Sam. I think I just called the number or whatever, and it led me to Sam. But I was like, I don't know if this is some sort of like HIPAA thing or something, but we got to help him. Like, can we not do anything to help this guy? Like, he is like having panic attacks at night, and we need to help him. Right. So, and we did, we got together with somebody, and I went with him for the first time and sat there and let him explain to somebody how he was feeling. And at the James, there's so many good resources for that. And I think he very quickly saw the benefit in just, I think he thought, well, yeah, we're going to call a counselor and what are they going to do about it? They don't know. And I'm like, they do though. Like, that's their job. Like, it's a science, you know what I mean? And so I think that helped a lot. I mean, once we got him rolling with somebody to talk to and somebody who could convince him he didn't have to just sit and hold all this pain inside, right? And that he could talk about it and express himself positively. That was really, really good for Aaron. And he continued with a counselor for a while by himself as well. And that was really, really good. I also, it's funny, but Chris said that, you think about stuff being wrong all the time. I went super off the deep end with the kids. Like, I was just like, they would like cough and I would be like, why are you coughing? Or they would say their stomach hurt and I would be like, no.
Like worried.
I just was so scared. And I have a friend who's a nurse practitioner and she was just like 24-hour call in. I would be like, the kids are coughing. And she'd be like, yeah, there's a cold going around. And I'd be like, okay, thanks, bye. I just had to be like, somebody tell me that, that the kids are okay. And also like, that's so normal to feel that way. And that it seems really, really crazy, but it's not crazy like to feel like that. And Chris is totally right. The further away from it that we get, the better. My anxieties that everybody has some sort of horrible disease or cancer or something else, right, is going away. And I think Aaron's learned a lot about coping with anxiety now, and he's better off as well. And the further away from it we get, the tougher he gets as well.
And I do, Rachel, I appreciate you saying that, right? Because like strength, I appreciate all of you guys sharing, but like strength is also sort of being able to put down the barbell to be like, all right, I need help on the next rep, And so I think like we talk about the gym, we talk about survivorship, there's normally no shame to call into your oncologist being like, I'm having this side effect. But somehow in survivorship, I think sometimes there's this sort of belief that like, oh no, if I still have symptoms, like I'm going to just have to hold that myself. And this is the social worker in me. I appreciate sort of that you guys are saying there's still value of saying like, this is hard and there is still help. And I appreciate that. So thanks. I do know that there are some attendees and I just want to open it up. If anybody is having questions, feel free to write in the chat and we can share. You'll stay anonymous. I can just read the questions if there's anything you'd want to know while we have this captive panel of young adult survivors, either about anything with treatment or survivorship.
While we wait, if there's anything, or while we wait for questions, one thing that I thought was really helpful, if there's anybody that's just starting, is the MyChart. Like sitting in the hospital, being able to get your results that you're waiting on to do the next thing or whatever, getting those instantly. And, then I could share them with my wife. I could, that was extremely helpful. So I was really glad to have had that.
I think if you're not sure how to tell people too, like the exam or, it's great to talk to, because I know it was like a month's worth of, we're pretty sure it's benign, and my husband was an integral part of that. He actually found my lump. I could still not know maybe. And so then it became, okay, how do I tell him? How's he going to handle this? What is he going to do? And I just remember calling and being like, I don't know what to tell my husband or when to tell him or what we're going to do. And, I think in the back of my head, I didn't want it to be like he was trapped or like, okay, well now she's the cancer patient. And, like it's stupid thoughts. Like he was like, you're being ridiculous. But, you become this new person who has cancer. And so I would say reach out. Like if you don't know what to do or how to talk to someone about, your diagnosis, they're super helpful.
I am going to read this question. What was it like going back to work and hanging out with people in person after being isolated? Personally, being locked down after COVID, the combination locked me inside of the house, going through chemo as well. So just would be interested to hear your guys' perspective, kind of reintegrating after treatment.
For me, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't take a whole lot of precautions. Like we kept our group small and they had to be vaccinated. And I was fully vaccinated, thankfully, right before it all started. But as far as we were smart about no big events, but we did everything with friends. We just did smaller gatherings. And so for me, that having that tight group, I didn't really have to reintegrate. But for me, it was without hair. What are they gonna think about me not having hair? Which no one cares, but that was in my mind. And for work, I was off for 7 months and I had a completely remote job, so no one saw me. But then they wanted everyone on video calls coming back. So I had a wig that I still have. I wore for my wedding. I actually keep it in my office with me. And with my new job, I was I'm not ready for them. They didn't know, but I'm not, the short hair is just a new thing for me. So the first couple of times I've worn they probably think I'm nuts at this point because they see the wig, then they see my real hair, then they see the wig. So they're probably thoroughly confused, but it works. So it wasn't super hard for me.
I'll say it was a little scary doing it through COVID because like I said, I had taken a new job as a teacher and I'm teaching welding and you can't teach welding remotely. So we were all in person and, fighting kids to wear their masks and stay back and social distance. And then, I have to be in close proximity with them to physically help them weld. Right. So it wasn't super fun to be in that environment and be worried about a poor immune system. But we got through it and did the best we could with it.
And you guys are being kind of humble and right now I think, if you're just being diagnosed or if you're just out of it, you're maybe still in the angry phase, right? Where you'd like to put it all behind you and forget this ever happened phase. And whether you're ready to accept that or not, I'm going to tell you that it is now part of your identity. This is forever going to be now a part of your identity. And right now, like I said, you may be ticked off about that, but eventually I think you come to terms with it and you start seeing how you can sit on a panel like this and hopefully help somebody or give somebody some advice that hits home or, Erin's just constantly being asked to talk to somebody's kid or this or that, or he's, an artist and makes welding art and he, with ribbons on it or whatever. And it goes to the Auglaize County, whatever cancer society. It's you're mad now, but it's going to be a part of your identity and it's going to eventually be a positive part of your identity, believe it or not. There's going to be really good community from it and really good things that come from it.
I will say going to my job, working with, teenagers, I was not excited about losing the hair, because I started off the year with this full set here and beard and all that stuff. And then, midway through the year, lost my hair and I really didn't I was excited to lose my hair, to be honest, because then I felt that people could see, that I was sick and that they would relate easier, or they would
be easy on you?
Yeah, I don't know. I just that what I was feeling inside, was physical. Now they could see it, but especially when I lost my eyebrows, I just really didn't like the way that I looked, and so like I remember seeing pictures of myself, and I said out loud that I looked ugly, and like I don't know. That's such a harsh thing to say about yourself, and I'm not ashamed to post those pictures now, but it was hard for sure at the time.
I don't think I ever posted any, to be honest. Like I wouldn't let people post, or I was wearing a wig. If like we went out, if we went to dinner, did anything, I would only be bald in my own house or with a cap, and even now, I remember, I think over the summer when I was starting to get like my fuzziness, and someone posted a photo, and I almost like freaked out about it. And I was like, you know what? Like, it is what it is. Like, I can't hide from the world. Like, I am going to see my friends. Like, I'm not always going to want to wear my wig. Like, and so I was like, all right, well, it's out there. And so, like, I'm just not getting more comfortable with people seeing me without the wig. But looking back at those photos, like, I don't even recognize the person that it was, or like, just someone Saturday night that we haven't seen in a year and a half. They're like, oh, since when are you rocking the short hair look? And you don't know what to say. And like, it was a friend of ours, and I was like, well, actually cancer took it. And then they're like, oh, well, about that. And so it's like this awkward thing because they don't know whether to like ask you about it or like stay away from it. And so, it is a conversation piece, but for me, the gym was like, what do I wear to the gym with no hair? And so that was a tough one. And, they had a little pink thing they gave you at the James, and I just wore that, but that was hard for me. I don't know how long it'll take for me to be okay to like post one of those photos.
And oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say I could share a little bit, but I think
Yeah.
they covered it pretty well. So
Okay.
I'll let.
Rachel, this one's for you. As a caregiver, how did you connect to caregivers? Maybe did you connect to any caregivers being young? My grandmother was a caregiver for my grandpa, and that's the closest I felt to someone understanding what I'm going through, but she's 75.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're spot on. That's, just the pain that these guys are talking about, that there's fewer young adult cancer patients. There's also obviously then fewer young adult caregivers to relate to and to connect with. And to be honest with you, throughout the whole entire process, I did not want to connect with other caregivers. And that's just me personally. I just felt like I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to, how could anybody else understand, kind of thing. And I kind of went inside a little bit, but what was helpful was, in my opinion, if you can go have dinner with a good friend who's willing to talk to you and listen to you and support you, no matter what kind of friend, that's almost like as good as going to therapy. And so I did that. You kind of figure out which friends are those kinds of friends in a situation like that. And I kind of leaned on them a lot. I had friends who would bring a casserole over. I had a friend who brought me a casserole probably once a week for 3 months. And to be honest with you, I don't know if I would have eaten unless I had that casserole. So I think having support people is important as a caregiver. Yes, very much so. And if you And I think you work with the James or whatever you got to do to find those people if you want that. But just taking some time and finding somebody to talk to was so valuable. To have my close friends for sure.
And I don't, we didn't want to talk about that 24/7. You're already talking about it at the hospital. You're talking about it to relate to your friends and family. So, if we didn't want to spend all of our time just talking about that. So having someone for her to vent to was pretty nice, I think.
Yeah. I was fortunate that I had some close friends that I could spend time with, but it's just like anything else. You have to do something about that. If you want to talk to other caregivers, then you go that route and you find out who you can be connected with. And if you want somebody else to spend time with besides the person that you're caring for, then you have to reach out and you have to figure out what to do with the kids, and you have to make time for yourself and not feel guilty about it, and just go talk to somebody.
And just a quick plug, there is the Hope program at the James, which I'm sure after this we can send some information on, but they will help you identify if you're a patient interested in talking with someone else who's been through treatment, and also for the caregiver role. And you're able to request a younger caregiver as well. So that's there too. All right, well, I think we're going to be wrapping up here. I know we said till 7:15 and we ran a few minutes over, but I really appreciate your guys' willingness. Okay, we're gonna go do one more question and then I promise I'll wrap up, because I think this is valuable to a lot of patients. So hopefully you're willing to do this, stay on a few more minutes. How did you slowly get back to activity, like lifting, exercising, doing things around the house? Was there something you followed, or how did you sort of trust yourself again with those kinds of things?
So after I went through my surgery, I was in a sling for about 3 months, and so that was my biggest limiter, is that the rest of me was more or less fine. I could do just about anything other than the chemotherapy obviously lowers a lot of your different abilities. So you'd definitely be out of breath more quickly and that kind of thing. But so I was in a sling for about 3 months after my surgery. And once I was out of that, the James had a really great program. They got me going right away with a physical therapy specialist that started showing me and all the different exercises I could go through, and slowly but surely gain more strength in that arm. And one thing that I was always very adamant about from the very beginning, even meetings with my surgeon, was that I was saying, okay, you're going to take most of my right arm, but am I going to be able to golf again? Something that's always been a really big hobby of mine. And he's like, I'm not so sure. I'm just trying to save, I'm just trying to save your life. Like, if you get to golf, it's a great bonus. But he was very concerned about me breaking the very nice arm piece that he was going to put in there for me. So I went through the physical therapy bit and got my arm back up to a good stage. And I did, like I said, everything I could think of to kind of work that arm more. I'd push my little IV cart around with my right arm. And honestly, so later that year, actually in the middle of the summer, about 6 months after my surgery, I was able to start swinging a golf club again. And I slowly built that up. At first I had to be very very kind of gentle with it. I mean, you just you gain ground as you go. It's kind of like learning to walk or ride a bike or any other activity that you're learning to do again for the first time. It's not like a sudden rush back to it. You're going to slowly get better and better with it until, honestly, nowadays, I don't even realize that this isn't part of me. It just feels natural now. So I hope that everyone else's on this panel's experiences are the same, but that was mine with it.
Yeah, I think it comes back to give yourself some grace, knowing that you're not going to be back to what you might have been, but you're there. You're doing something. My husband and I, we like to do hikes or go to like state parks and do stuff. And it was tough during chemo, but we tried. But sometimes we had to take a break, and if my heart was going a little crazy or whatnot, and just the 3-mile walk might have taken us 3 hours by the time we were done with it, but we did it. And so I think getting back into the swing of things, just knowing like I'm showing up, I'm giving my best that I can. But I said the same thing, like, working out and doing my classes I like is important to me, and it's part of who I am and mentally and whatnot. And it's just, you'll get there. For me, I had surgery. And so that, I can't do the whole jumping thing as easily anymore. But you just make adaptations, and you learn what you can and can't do, and you build your tolerance. Like looking back where I was even 2 months ago, I'm doing so much better. And so just knowing it gets easier, your tolerance gets up, just keep doing it. If it's a walk around the neighborhood or walk around the block, start there. And work your way up from there, but you will get there. Your body is, especially being younger, we're so resilient. I think that, we do kind of bounce back, but we have a lot greater shot than someone in their 50s or 60s.
And I'll just echo it just a little bit more. The way that I gauged physical activity was, how I was feeling, not based on if the doctor said I could lift or not. It was based on how I was feeling then. I was pretty active before going into treatment, and it was frustrating, seeing some of that work turn a little gooey. But I stayed up with things that were maybe a little bit less strenuous. I did yoga, bicycling, kayaking. We did a lot of hiking. Put in those miles with the IV cart. Just whatever I felt like I could handle was kind of how I gauged it. But also too, I'll say between rounds 4 and 5, I went on the longest backpacking hike that I've done in my life, with a 5-year-old that couldn't carry his backpack. So I ended up carrying that too. And, that was both, a mental hurdle and a physical one. And it felt so good to do it. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think Aaron can really, you don't have to, if you feel good, you don't have to then do it. Then he felt good. And so he did it, and it was kind of scary, and I was scared, but I think Aaron can really attest to just you don't feel like you have to stop your whole life. I mean, you are a young adult, right? And you are resilient, and you maybe were physically active before this. And if you feel good, then be careful and go do it. Go do it.
There were definitely times where I was tired. I mean, you get tired. There's definitely times where that happened, but I remember often, telling the nurse that I felt like I could go out. The James has that structure in front of the door, and I could go do pull-ups on that in front of the James with my IV cart. I felt fine. I felt like I felt normal. So it's not, I wouldn't say every case is the same where you are drained and feel like crap. I felt good for the most part. Just got tired sometimes.
I think you also learned your cycles. So like mine was every other week. So you learn and I had a couple different drugs. So I had one set of 4 and then another set of 4 with 2 drugs. And I learned, what the first couple days would be and when my peak and my low would be. And so we kind of, I guess, did activity based on where we were at in that cycle. And just knowing, all right, the weekend before my next chemo was my best weekend where I felt the best. The weekend after my chemo, good luck. But you learn what your cycles are like and what you can and can't do. I think is helpful.
Thank you. And another sort of quick plug just about James programming. We do these young adult get-togethers once a month, the meetups, and next month just happens to be starting a workout routine May 12th. And I would assume that by coming to this program, you'll start to get email reminders about upcoming programs. So also keep a lookout for that. I just want to thank you guys again. We'll wrap up here, but I so appreciate your willingness to share and be open, and I appreciate questions. You guys are getting a lot of thank yous from the chat, so just know that everyone is very appreciative of you willing to be vulnerable and share your experience. So are we.
If there's any questions that didn't get answered, I mean, I'm open. I'm sure, and you can get the question to me in some form. So if anybody missed anything or thinks of anything later.
I think we're all open books. I mean, at this point, you go through so much that you do lose some sense of, you know, things that you probably would have never talked about with anybody or new topics. So I would encourage everyone, yeah, if you have questions that you think are embarrassing, like we've all been there. So ask away, we're all open books, and just know like we are proof that you'll get through it and lead a normal life again.
Yeah, thank you guys for hearing us, of course. Always happy to answer anything that you guys have. We are happy to be resources.